Welcome here to TalkFCB and welcome back to the channel, guys. Hope you're all doing well after the Classico yesterday. I hope you're all finding something else to do here on Sunday besides football and, of course, watching the channel. That is what it's all about. But in today's video, we are going to be moving on from that game. And just before we start talking about Juventus, of course, to come next week, another massive game for us, I'm going to be talking today about something I wanted to cover since Friday, because Gerard Pique finally has broken his silence, and he's spoken out against Bartomeu, the current regime, and of course, the wage disputes at the club right now, Lionel Messi's situation, and the vote of no confidence that is currently ongoing. It's all coming up, full quotes, in a big interview from Piqué. Let's get to it. Because indeed, on Friday, Gerard Pique finally came out and spoke to the public on everything that's been going on over the past few months at Barcelona. And he did an interview there with La Vanguardia on Friday. And like I say, this was 24 hours before El Clasico. And I've been waiting until now to get an opportunity to cover what he said. And first of all, he was asked there in the interview, how are you doing? How are you doing? Because you've been so quiet. Why have you not spoken over the past few months? Because he has been surprisingly quiet given everything that's going on, and given that usually Piqué is a very outspoken character. Piqué replied there, I'm doing very well. He said the end of last season was very dramatic and I needed time to digest it all. I used the days off to completely reset. He said it's about starting over again. When something like what happened in Lisbon, of course against Bayern, when something like that happens, it's something that lives forever in the history of the club, and the executives have to take decisions. He said you can lose, but never like that. And I still firmly believe what I said after that game. And in the response to that there, he was then asked by the interviewer, would you really have left the club? As he did say, after that game, after the defeat to Bayern, he said, if I have to, I would be the first to leave Barcelona. And Piqué said, if the board or the coach would have told me that they didn't count on me, he said, I would have been okay with that. He said, the club is bigger than anybody. That's what I felt. And he said, I still feel like that to this day. Piqué was then asked a bit of a wider question about what is going wrong at the club right now, how have we gotten into this situation, and what do you feel has really gone wrong in order to actually see all of these things happen, like we've seen over the past few months and seasons. He said, we reached the sky with the treble in 2015. He said, from then onwards, the club has been going down instead of up. And he said, I think that tendency has been clear for everybody to see. He said, there's lots of bad habits at the club that needed profound change. And this is when it does start to get very, very interesting for me, when Piqué is asked there about Valverde's sacking and whether that was a mistake, and in particular about player power when it comes to Barcelona. He said it's easy now to comment, of course, given how things turned out. He said we won't ever know what would have happened. He said, but for me, to fire the coach that won 2 leagues, and when you're leading the table, it doesn't make sense to me. If it was up to Piqué, he would have kept Ernesto Valverde. But he was then asked about the process in making that decision with a captains involved. Did the players help to push out Valverde? He said, rather than asking us to make the decision, what they did, talking about the board, he said they told us before it was publicly announced. He said we were not part of the decision. And he was then asked, interestingly, do the players have too much power? And this is an answer that I really want to focus on. He said that's something that gets said a lot. He said, I know. He said, but a club works well and healthier for everybody when all of the hierarchies are clear. He said the president has to be on top. Then the coach has to rule over the players. He said if we, and this is the important bit, he said if we as players ever had any power, it's because other people didn't want to use their own power. And that for me is an absolutely brilliant statement there, whether it's about Valverde, whether it's about Setien, regardless of any coach at this club, if those at the top are not strong, if they do not use their power and delegate in the right way, if you do not have there a strong backbone, the rest of it crumbles. And if these players have ever had any player power, Piqué says it there, it's because they've been allowed to do that by those above them, which is where the root of the problem has always been with Bartomeu. And speaking of that man, Piqué was then asked, do you get on with the president? Do you get on in a personal relationship there with Bartomeu? And Piqué said, I don't want to get on badly with anybody. He said, but there have been times, like the social media issue, that as a Barcelona player, when I see that my club has spent money that actually went to criticising not only people with a historical relationship with the club, but actually active players, he said, that's barbaric. He said, I cannot get my head around that. He said, I asked Bartomeu for an explanation, and he told me, Gerard, I didn't know about it, and I believed it. But he said, then later, we see the person in charge of hiring those services is still working at the club. Piqué went on to say, it hurts a lot. He said, it does hurt me. And he said, I can say this. I can come out and say this publicly because I told Bartomeu myself what I think. He said, what do you want me to say? Is it painful? Yes. Can I do anything about it? Well, no, not really. He said, my relationship with the president may be cordial, but there are things that have stayed with me. And things got even more interesting then when Piqué was asked about the Messi situation. Of course, something that dragged on for most of the transfer window over the course of the summer, and it was all handled absolutely appallingly from top to bottom, starting there with Bartomeu himself. Piqué said, if I was president, I would have acted differently. He said, I asked Leo to hold on, even though I didn't have many dealings with him in those days because I thought it was a personal decision that he had to make. He said, I do remember saying, Leo, it's just 1 year, and then new people will come in, talking there about the new board that will come in at the end of the season. He said, I asked myself, how can it be that the best player in history, who we have the luck to enjoy, gets up one day, sends a burofax to the club because he feels as though they're not listening to him? It's shocking. What is going on? And Piqué there, speaking on behalf of all of us, that's how we've all felt. He said, it surprises me that people like Pep, talking about Guardiola, Puy, talking about Carlos Puyol, Xavi, or Valdez are not at the club. He said something isn't being done well if they're not here. He said you have to keep those people around. They're part of the club's history. They're the ones who've made it great. They should be here. And I think what Piqué is saying there, the fact those legends, those icons, they don't want to be seen working under this board, that, like I say, tells you everything you need to know. And this is another very interesting thing because obviously over the past weeks there have been many talks going on behind the scenes between the board and the players over these wage deductions. Basically the board have gone to all of the first team players at Barcelona and they said, look, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, they said we cannot afford to pay you what we currently are. We need you to take wage cuts. Please can you agree to earn less money at least for the time being? Now I think the board there quite clearly, they're actually using COVID-19 rather appallingly, to be honest, for actually their own game because they got us into this mess way before COVID even got here. The wage bill has been out of control for as long as I can remember, and now they're saying, look, we can't really afford this, so could you please have some reductions right now? Now, it was interesting, because after the game on Tuesday, the big win against Ferencváros, the club came out, and very quietly, they sort of announced it right after the game finished, almost as if it could just slip under the radar, that Frenkie de Jong, Clement Lenglet, Gerard Piqué, and Marc-Andre ter Stegen had all signed new contracts at the club. De Jong there renewing until 2026, Lenglet the same, Piqué renewing until 2024, and ter Stegen there signing a brand new contract until 2025, with all of those players said to have agreed to a wage cut in the short term. And it was interesting because Piqué then in that interview was asked about that contract. They said to Piqué, they said, all of this stuff you're saying about Bartomeu, it didn't stop you from signing a new contract. They said, why? He said, it didn't stop me because the club comes to me. He said, they told me and other players that due to the pandemic, the club will suffer a lot from an economic standpoint. And in that regard, Barca is above everyone else. He said, Barcelona has given me everything. I'm at the club's disposal. They told me that whatever salary I gave up this year, I would be paid back in the future. We did the math and I proposed the reduction I was okay with, and it was done. And that for me is so concerning to see that there, that Piqué has openly admitted that basically what this board have done, they've agreed there with ter Stegen, De Jong, Lenglet, Piqué, new contracts, long deals, and they basically said, okay, if you take a cut now until the end of our time, and then in the next presidency, in the next few years, it'll all be paid back to you. And I think that is a big problem, and how they've been allowed to do that, I really don't know. And they asked Piqué there, they say, isn't that a mortgage for the future board? Isn't that a problem there for the future president? And Piqué Piqué said, no, I think it's helping the club. He said it's possible that the load will indeed be heavier to carry in the future for the new board, but he said right now, to make sure there's a future, we needed to do this now. But for me, it is very, very wrong. This board has got us into such a huge mess, and it is so frustrating. But looking to that future, looking there to some glimmer of hope, of course we're going to talk about the motion of no confidence. It is still ongoing right now. We are still awaiting the date that is going to be confirmed there for the referendum, where the Socis could indeed vote Bartomeu out of power. And they asked Gerard Pique there about that no confidence vote. They said, did you expect to see it happen? And he said it was very interesting. He said the conclusion we can take from that is that the club is more alive than ever. To get more than 20,000 signatures in these circumstances, he said it seems insane, because the fact there are so many people that are rebelling even during this pandemic, it shows the club isn't asleep. And it was very, very intriguing then, because they then said, will you vote in the referendum? Piqué said, yeah. He said, I will exercise my right as a club member to cast my vote. They said, you're not going to say, though, which way you're going to vote, are you? And Piqué said, nope, the votes are confidential. But I think you could probably guess, with what he said here, which way Piqué would vote. Bartomeu's time is coming to an end, and honestly, it cannot come quickly enough. So that right there, guys, is everything that we heard on Friday from Gerard Piqué in that interview. At last, he finally gave his thoughts on what has been happening at the club in recent times. I'll keep you very much updated on everything else we hear, of course, with regard to the vote of no confidence. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on all the quotes that we've heard today, and thank you indeed for watching. As always, guys, I'll be back next week as we build up to that massive game against Juventus. But until next time, as always, Visca el Barça!